Hey bosses, it's Marie from Asian Boss. When it comes to Singapore, what's the first thing that pops into your head? The death penalty is probably not one of them, yet that's exactly what's causing a public debate in Singapore right now. It all started when an intellectually disabled man received the death penalty for smuggling drugs into Singapore in 2010, and his execution was supposed to take place last week on November 10, until it got postponed because he had tested positive for COVID. So how do ordinary Singaporeans feel about this case and the death penalty system in general? Our Asian Boss reporter hit the streets of Singapore to find out.
Familiar with the recent news about an intellectually disabled man who received a death sentence for trafficking heroin into Singapore?
Yeah, I heard about it, yeah.
I've read about it a few times on social media.
Is it a highly debated topic in Singapore right now?
As far as I know, I think it is. Primarily because of the of how he has an intellectual disability, and I think there are some people that form the view that because of that, he should not be held responsible for his actions. Yeah.
So for the international viewers who might not be familiar, can you give us a little bit more background about what's happening in this case now?
As far as I know, Nagaenthran, he's a Malaysian citizen who trafficked an amount of heroin that exceeded the threshold which attracted the mandatory death penalty. And also the Malaysian Prime Minister has returned to the Singapore Prime Minister, and the response is that he has been through the due process of the law.
I think the main highlight is that the person has a very low IQ. According to him, he was threatened to do the drug trafficking to pay his debts. Yeah, so and there has been it's quite controversial. It's a controversial topic on whether the death sentence given to him is humane or not.
He was supposed to be death sentenced, executed on 10 November, but he got COVID. So they're okay, quarantine him for 2 weeks first. After that, then execute him, which is kind of dumb Then there have been a lot of petitions online for people to stop the death sentence.
So for our foreign viewers who might not know, there actually is the death penalty in Singapore, and it's quite surprising to some. Do you know which crimes in Singapore warrant the death penalty?
Drugs, a lot of drugs, not just small amounts. Murders, as far as I know, is kidnapping, firearms, and also drugs. So these are the three major issues that will pose a lot of uneasiness, because we experienced that way back in the 50s and 60s, where there's a lot of riots, mistrust among the majority community and also among the minority community. So we don't want that to happen.
And even in some countries, people are legalizing cannabis. But in Singapore, do you think that you can possibly receive the death penalty for possessing cannabis?
As far as I know, possessing cannabis, yes, I think you can receive the death penalty if the weightage exceeds a certain amount.
So actually for cannabis, over 500 grams, it's still the death penalty. So how do you feel about that?
I guess it's really down to what the leaders here think. I'm not a real advocate of the death penalty, but at the same time, I guess it's also the way that they feel deters or minimizes such activity in Singapore. Yeah, that's what I feel. Yeah, but cannabis-wise, 500 grams, that's quite a lot though.
So do you think that this law should apply to tourists as well?
Oh yeah, if you go to someone's country, you should obey their rules. So you should be prepared that if you go to someone's country, you make sure you know the law over there, not to bring in any illegal things.
I know that there's a saying about, if you're in Rome, do as the Romans do, but I truly believe that when it comes to death penalty, it's something to not take lightly. So death penalty is taking away someone's life entirely. And I think something such as possessing cannabis, or perhaps even just having it in your hand or something like that, it feels very extreme to kill someone based upon just that factor. Perhaps they got mixed up into something, perhaps they need it for medical uses or something like that. So I think it's far too strict of a punishment.
There's two sides of the coin. I mean, number one is that if it applies to tourists or rather foreigners, then it's in a way protecting the interests of our own people as a Singaporean, because if you actually only apply the rules to a local in Singapore, then foreigners may open up the doors to allowing other people from other countries where like countries like Canada where it's legal, and then they come over here. That might be one of the things that may not be so good. But at the same time, it's also a little bit unfair, as some of the foreigners may not be fully aware that it's very illegal here. And even if they are aware that it's illegal, they may not be aware that it carries the death penalty.
And in some cases, just because you receive the death penalty doesn't mean you will actually be executed, right? Because it takes many years. But in Singapore, do you think that people really do get executed? And if so, then how often does it happen?
I don't think it's a very common thing because I don't really hear about it often.
I think in most cases, even if there's murder, they choose the judge chooses life imprisonment. So I think that's also a better option because it also gives them time to reflect, and they can change, rather than just killing them. And it also it takes quite a long time before they're actually executed.
I don't think it's that often because considering how the death penalty is, an extreme penalty, I don't think a lot of people in Singapore actually commit crimes that severe. So not very often, less than 10 definitely.
So on average, it's about 2 to 4. And then the last time it was very high was 8 in 2017. So in your opinion, do you think this particular case, the guy merits the death penalty?
I don't think so, yeah, because again, he's intellectually disabled. I think they should give him a bit more leniency.
If he was identified as mentally incapable, I think that he might be used as a mule to smuggle drugs. So I think the judge should have some leeway on this one. Yeah, it shouldn't be a death penalty. Yeah, it should be reinvested on this case.
It's unreasonable, and it's even more unreasonable is because that he didn't even know what he was going into. So it's not even because for Singapore there is some of the for example sexual assault, they can only they jail them up to 2 years, but then for something like this it's a death sentence, which is very unreasonable to me lah. Yeah,
I did read about it, and they say he was clearly knowing what he was doing when he was committing his actions and all lah. But even if that is so, then I don't think he still deserves such a serious sentence lah. I don't think anybody can decide who should receive death sentence and how. And honestly, there are much more crimes that are more serious than this.
If you ask about my fair opinion, I think justice has to be done in the sense that it will try to prevent people from smuggling drugs illegally into Singapore. So what the government is trying to do, or even the authorities trying to do, is to stop this illegal trafficking, because we won't know who these peddlers are and whether there are syndicates behind it. So we need to make a firm stand.
So even though I might not be, I'm not personally of the opinion that IQ could potentially affect someone's mental capabilities, I do believe that in public consciousness, or at least in public perception, it's very obvious that something such as, oh, this person is intellectually disabled, this feels like a case that should have these conditions considered. That's what I personally believe here. In the public eye, it's definitely.
So in his case, do you think that the death penalty is warranted?
I don't believe that the death penalty is warranted in this case. If anything, it should be a very long jail sentence, but definitely not death.
So everybody says that Singapore is very safe, right? So even with this level of safety in Singapore, do you think the death penalty is necessary?
It's very safe. I don't think so. It all depends on situation. Even we think that our country is safe, we still need to exercise caution also. It should be reviewed independently for all cases, because this one is a particular case because of his IQ. The rest, if you have a IQ that's higher, you should know the consequences. That's what I feel.
I feel actually there might be quite a number of people who feel it should be taken away completely, but it's true that if it hurts a lot of people, if it really affected and affected the life of many, then kind of they do deserve it lah. Yeah. But I feel like nobody should be able to like have a say on how people like whether people should leave or not leave. Like at most give a life sentence. No, please don't cancel culture. Yeah, please don't cancel culture. Please don't.
I personally don't think that it's necessary, but there will be some people who think so, because the reason that our crime rate is so low is because of the extremity of the punishments dealt in Singapore. So
Yeah, I agree. So because if the death penalty isn't there, then people just think that max is like life imprisonment, but they're still like able to live their life, especially since like the life imprisonment is like 30 years. So for like younger people, they'll feel like it's nothing much maybe. So I feel like the death penalty does help to reduce like the crime rates because people are like afraid of it.
It is a difficult question because on the one hand, Singapore has always remained, its stance on drug trafficking, and for good reason, right? Economic stability, social stability as well. But on the other hand, there's also the competing tension of an individual human right, the right to life and so on. And I think this issue is not old. It has always been debated, in the courts, in parliament even. I think death penalty can be appropriate in the correct situation. But I think in relation to drugs, I don't think it's something that personally I don't think that is justifiable. I guess historically, the reason why the death penalty was enacted, I can't recall, but if I'm not wrong, it's probably due to wanting, making sure that Singapore has a very stable social grounding. Obviously, as a young country back then, we couldn't have citizens just on drugs and all that. So I think it was a very draconian and effective measure. But I think times have changed, right?
Do you think in Singapore we would ever abolish the death penalty?
I don't think so because the government is like quite strict. So I don't think they'll. Yeah.
I don't think so either. Yeah, because as she said, our government is very strict, and considering that our Singapore government works on discipline, I don't think we'll ever abolish it.
They might abolish it eventually. I think it's a possibility. As society changes, the views also changes. Everything changes. Like even for us, whether it's about women's education or everything, things change. So I think it's possible that one day we might abolish the death penalty as well. Yeah.
In Singapore, I believe that, it should be abolished for the more lesser crimes, but I don't think it'll ever be abolished. Mainly because what I personally heard and what I personally observed is Singapore has a very strict government, and in general it's very rule-driven. And I think because of that, it's a very unlikely chance for the death penalty to be abolished anytime soon.
He has to maintain that way to ensure that we have a cohesive and more progressive multiracial country. We need to have a drug-free kind of society so that our society, in fact all the community, whether it's a minority or majority community, will feel safe at all times. So they don't have to worry about peddlers or smuggling or what. So I think the government has introduced a very firm stand, but it's good for the community and for the society at large, and also for the country.
So how do you think that some foreigners might feel hearing that Singapore has such harsh laws? Do you have anything to say to them to reassure them that it's still okay to visit Singapore?
If you mention some country, I'm pretty sure it's America. Yeah, it's what do you call? America is a very progressive country. They have their own thinking, the land of freedom, but sometimes being too woke, it's a problem. Sometimes being too strict is a problem. We're just very happy to be in the middle ground sometimes. Yeah, let the American do whatever woke things that have to be done. Let the China handle whatever strict things that have to be done. We're just lucky to be in the middle ground. Yeah.
Here, I have friends from overseas coming here all the time. Before COVID. It's something that we always welcome people. It's fun here. There are things to do here. But But that being said, I don't think that the death penalty for drugs should be something that we feel deters people from coming in. And even if it does deter people from coming in, then I think we actually stop the right people from, rather the wrong people from coming in. Yeah, so I think that would be okay, in my opinion. Yeah.
I do believe that some of the harsh laws might put off people that are not from Asian countries or perhaps countries with more looser regulations. But I really believe that they should come here anyways, just for visitation or school or anything like that. Because, well, Singapore truly is a very unique country despite all the government regulations and how strict it may be. It's really a country of diverse culture. It has a lot of things that, you know, as someone from Indonesia, I never really seen before. It's very amazing. And if anything, just do your best to not break the rules if that's possible. And I think if you do that, you'll have a very great time in Singapore.